My name is Kinga. Thank you all for coming out tonight. And this idea of a motivational speech, I love how they call it a motivational speech. I'm not exactly here to motivate you. I'm actually more interested in creating connections between people. I'm really, really passionate about bringing people's authenticity out, to connect them in groups, to have deeper conversations. And I think that's something that's maybe lacking in our culture. We don't quite get to that real juicy conversation with people. So that's kind of what I'm here to do with you tonight. So it's not going to be like, motivation session. Sorry if you came for that. But I do hope that you'll get some inspiration out of it. And certainly, some good conversations and maybe some connections with people. So let's have a look here. A little bit about me. I'm originally Hungarian, but I lived in Australia for a long time. In fact, I think that's kind of where my passion for connecting people comes from, because I grew up in a small town in Transylvania, which is kind of the Hungarian part of Romania, called Székelyudvarhely. And my grandmother lived in a little village near there. And she used to, people were really interconnected in that society. It was still communist dictatorship at the time. This was back in, 1980s. And my grandmother used to kind of do this swap and exchange. We had chickens, and the lady, our neighbor opposite us, had cows. So we used to do this kind of eggs for milk exchange. And I'm really used to having, I grew up in a society that was really interconnected. And then in '86, my mum packed our suitcases and decided that we were leaving the country. It was still Ceausescu, communist dictatorship. And we ended up spending 2 years in Austria in kind of refugee camp. And finally ended up in Australia back in '86 when I was 12, which was a bit of a rude shock, really, because we were kind of torn away from this really communal, interdependent society, and Australia being very modern and everyone's almost overly independent, and it was quite a culture shock. So I think there's some part of me that's always wanted to recreate this little Hungarian village. And I did that in various ways. I was teaching ballroom dancing, so I started like dance nights and brought people together. And then I was hosting some philosophy dinners with friends in Adelaide, in Australia. And we put those on for 2 years. Every month we get together and have big discussions and dinners and presenters. And more recently I started to get into coaching. And I love bringing people together to have these deeper discussions that kind of awaken something real and authentic in them. And also create a context and a culture where we can have these deeper connections, this deeper human support, get beyond the superficial, get beyond just the personality, and really deeply connect. So I'd like to kind of create a little bit of that with you tonight. The other thing is, in terms of my perspective, I feel like we live in interesting times. There's a Chinese proverb that says, "May you live in interesting times." And I don't know if that's kind of a blessing or a curse, but there's this, I believe that there's an imperative in all of us to grow, to transcend, and to expand, individually as well as culturally. And I think this time that we're living in, some of the chaos we're experiencing, I think this is more important than ever, to really connect to that part of ourselves that really wants to grow, because this is the time for that. This is the time for change. And also, so that's culturally, and then I have the sense that individually, we all have a special gift. We all have our, area of genius. We all have that part that we shine in, and that is the thing that we're able to contribute. And finally, so we got growth. Growth is important. Contribution, we have this imperative and this drive, and then connection. This is why we're all here tonight. We come out, we mingle, we're sophisticated social animals, and we want to be human together. We want to connect more deeply, and I think we live in a culture that doesn't always allow for these conversations to happen. So I would like to curate that a little bit tonight, and play with these deeper connections and see what happens from it. So this is what I'm going to do. We're going to get into small groups in a second. We're going to move up there, we're going to start walking around. And I'm just going to ask you 3 questions in these groups that I'm going to get you to share between each other. You don't have to be scared, it's okay, I'm going to do all the hard part, you just have to show up and basically just, be there. Like most of life, just life happens when you just show up. So I'm going to ask you 3 questions. that we're going to share in little groups. And then at the end, to finish off, we're going to play a bit of a game where we're going to really get a sense of the hidden resources of this group and what people can really be and do for each other. It's called the Queen Bee exercise. Anyway, you'll see what it's about. So I would like to invite you to stand up. And we're going to move into the middle here where we can walk around. So we're going to take turns in your groups of 3 to be the queen bee. And what you're going to do is you're going to tell the other 2 something that you need in your life. It could be an object, it could be a person, you might need a photographer, you might need a new phone, you might need a new pair of boots, I don't know. And you're going to send the other 2 out, and you're going to send the other 2 out to find that thing somewhere in this room that someone might have, or that someone that knows someone has. So let me give you an example. This sounds very abstract. So the first time I played this, I was in a group of 3, and one of the other guys, who was the queen bee, told us that, okay, go out and find me an interpreter who can interpret from Lithuanian to Greek in the room. And there was about 70 people in the room, and I was like, yeah, all right. So I'm going and asking, hey, I need an interpreter that can interpret from Lithuanian to Greek. Do you know someone? No. Go. Hey, no, but someone said, oh, but that guy's a linguistics professor. Go and ask him. Ugh, I run over, I get his card. He says, yeah, I can find someone like that. Give them my card. Connections made. So, we are a wellspring of resources. This whole idea of 6 degrees of separation. I think it's probably even less in the world now, considering technology. That we're all interconnected. If we don't have the resources, someone we know probably does. Now, if you can't think of something you need, you might need a photographer, you might need an interpreter from Lithuanian, I don't know. If you can't find something that you need, think about someone that you love that might need something. For example, I've got a really good friend who's an artist, and I could run around the room and find maybe an art gallery that could represent her. So stand in your groups of 3, take turns being the queen bee, send out your worker bees to find you what you need. You might need, like a music producer or something, and see what comes up in this group in terms of resources, and then we can share afterwards to see what people found or like. All right, go for it.